Nick Pivetta, coming into the offseason, people were wondering, what's going to happen with Nick Pivetta, right? Offered the qualifying offer. People were very surprised about it. People were, when it came to the qualifying offer with Nick Pivetta, people were thinking, this is way too much money for this guy, right? This is, how in the world is this guy getting $21 million? Like, of course he's going to accept it. I remember still, when he got offered it, you go to MLB Trade Rumors, they did their predictions. All of the guys that were making the picks on MLB Trade Rumors, they all picked him accepting the qualifying offer. I saw tons of people out there saying there is no way that he rejects the qualifying offer. I don't know. I felt like I'm not trying to like toot my own horn or anything, but I felt like I was the only one out there saying, I don't know. I feel like there's a good chance he probably doesn't take the qualifying offer, and he just goes out into the market. I just felt like I wasn't seeing that anywhere, anywhere on X. I don't know. Maybe there was a couple of people saying it, but I wasn't really seeing it all that much. But with Nick Pivetta today, he did what I thought he would. He declined it, right? If you take a look at the numbers with Nick Pivetta for this year, right? 27 games, 26 starts overall, ERA, FIP in the 4s. So you're looking at a guy that's, probably around, probably a 4th starter in a rotation, right? You're looking at a 4. You're looking at, maybe a 5 and really good rotations out there. Weaker rotations, you could probably see him being a 3. But one thing that was coming out when, after a day or two after he was offered the qualifying offer, they were getting some reports out there where teams were seeing him as a guy that you could take to the next level. And here's why. When you take a look at the rankings for Stuff Plus over the last few years, Nick Pivetta here ranks very well, right? If you take a look, 16th overall out of 156 qualified pitchers going back to 2021. That's pretty good, if you ask me, right? I mean, he's in some good company here, right? Number 1 being Corbin Burns, Strider, Cole, right? Cease, Glasnow, Ohtani. Here's Nick Pivetta just hanging out, right near the top tier there. So yeah, not surprised. And you combine that with some dependability, some durability, and he actually ranked very well when it came to innings pitched going back to 2021. 23rd overall out of the 156 qualified pitchers. Nick Pivetta's a guy, he's dependable, has good stuff, he can shove. This is a guy where, when you add those two things, you got a recipe for success and a pitcher that a lot of teams out there would like to add into their rotation. Now, the problem with Nick Pivetta, you're probably saying, well, Robbie, he's got good stuff. He's durable. Why isn't he an ace of a staff? Well, the problem with Pivetta is he runs into inconsistencies, right? He goes on great stretches where it seems like this guy could go out there, maybe, toss a no-hitter, next start, throws a shutout, right? You can't hit this guy. But then he kind of goes into some spells where he's just getting clobbered, right? We saw a lot of ups and downs where he even got moved to the bullpen, at one point. So with Pivetta, when he's on, he could absolutely shove, and he's a guy that you can count on. You just got to, with him, if he starts running into a stretch where he's not looking so hot, you got to kind of ride through that a little bit. But another thing with Pivetta is he has shown the ability to take the ball in a postseason game. Go back to 2021, right? Stepped up in a big way in that postseason. You can give this guy the ball in the regular season every 5th day, but you can also have the confidence in giving the ball in a big postseason game, right? This is a guy I would love to have in my rotation. If I was building my own rotation, like a realistic one, not like a fantasy one, but if there was a guy like Pivetta on the open market and I'm looking for, a 3 or a 4, I would love to go after Nick Pivetta. And another thing, when it came to just this qualifying offer and why I thought he would reject it was teams look for starting pitching like this, right? Yeah, we are always looking at the stars. We're looking at, Corbin Burns, Garrett Cole, Paul Skeens, right? The star pitchers in the game. But these are the guys that really provide a lot of value in different ways where you can hand the ball to him every fifth day. But with Pivetta, because of the good stuff that he has, there's a lot of teams out there where they feel like maybe they could put him into their own pitching lab and maybe get a bit more out of him. Look at a team like the Astros, right? Look at what they did with Yusei Kikuchi. Made a couple little tweaks, and then all of a sudden Yusei Kikuchi is looking like a 2 in the rotation, right? I think a lot of teams out there, they see that value in Pivetta. And to me, I'm not surprised here. I'm not surprised that Pivetta, is going to go out into the market. I think he's going to get himself a pretty solid deal. If I were to predict the deal, I think he's going to be probably, 3 years, $18.5 million per year. I could see a 3-year, 56, $60 million deal. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think you're going to see a lot of people out there. I guarantee you're going to go on Twitter. You're going to see when he signs, let's say it's a 3-year, 56, right? You're going to see people that are going to take a screenshot of his baseball reference page, and you're going to say, oh man, this guy's got an ERA in the 4s. I mean, why is this guy getting $56 million? I guarantee it's going to happen. Watch. You're going to have a lot of people out there that they're going to be pointing that out. But with Pivetta, you got to look a little deeper. You can even say the same thing happened back in 2020 when the Red Sox and Chaim Bloom acquired Nick Pivetta from the Phillies, right? You looked at Pivetta when they acquired him then. This was a guy that his ERA was in the 5s, I believe, or even the 6s. I can't remember. It didn't look very good. But this is a guy that had good breaking stuff, right? This has been a stuff guy. And Chaim Bloom at the time, he saw that in Pivetta, brought him over, right? You ended up sending back Brandon Workman in that deal. To me, he's kind of in a similar spot now where, there are a lot of good things about him, but you feel like you could even get a bit more out of him, right? That's what Chaim saw back in 2020. I absolutely think he's going to get himself a good deal this offseason. I think he's going to be one of the more solid options out there. If I'm thinking of teams that could maybe use someone like Nick Pivetta, I would think here, maybe a team like the Nationals. I could see something like that, right? Where they're about to enter a competitive window here. You got a lot of young pitching in that rotation, right? Mackenzie Gore, he took a pretty decent step forward this year. You got a few other guys, on the younger side, like Mitchell Parker, DJ Hers. I think a veteran like Pivetta would make a lot of sense for the Nationals, right? Give them a bit more stability in that rotation, right? We've seen a team like the Braves where they've been able to get a lot out of guys. Reynaldo Lopez was a good example for this year. Yeah, Chris Sale, sure, right? Probably going to win the Cy Young, but Chris Sale's, been good his entire career. Reynaldo Lopez was a guy that was kind of up and down, right? Was he a starter? Was he a reliever? But they brought him in this year, and he had an ERA at 1.99. So I think the Braves could be a good home for him right now. You're looking at I don't think Max Fried's going to come back. So I could see someone like Pivetta. I think that would make a lot of sense in my opinion. If I'm looking at some other teams here, they can maybe add something. I know the Blue Jays, they're looking to maybe add something, right? He is originally, if I remember correctly, I believe Nick Pivetta is from Canada, or am I wrong? Or is he from Canada? I can't remember. Or is he British Columbia? I can't remember exactly. But either way, the Blue Jays could use someone like him. I would hate for him to stay in the division. That would drive me nuts. But even a team like the Orioles, right? If they ended up losing Corbin Burns, they wanted to go for, a guy that's not going to be, a big contract like Max Fried. Maybe they could go for a 3-year deal for Pivetta, something like that. Maybe the Tigers, right? They need a bit more stability in that rotation. I could see something like that, right? They've been running that chaos pitching staff for a little bit. Give a bit more stability behind Skubal. I think that could make some sense there. There's a lot of teams. The Mets, right? They just had a few guys where I believe Luis Severino rejected his, so who knows if he goes back. Sean Manaea, who knows what happens with him. I could see the Mets maybe bringing him back, but I could see the Mets maybe being an option out there. We'll just have to wait and see on this. But Pivetta, he is absolutely going to have himself a good market. Now, because Nick Pivetta rejected the qualifying offer, this means the Red Sox are going to get a compensation pick in return from wherever he signs, right? And this could mean a couple of things. This could mean, okay, cool. All right, they got a compensation pick, right? Hey, good for the future. We'll draft another good player in the upcoming draft. Perfect. Or you could look at it this way. A lot of these guys, got QOs attached to them, right? Juan Soto, I mean, we're dreaming every day of Juan Soto maybe playing half a season at Fenway Park for the rest of his career. We'll have to just wait and see on that. I guess the Phillies are in it now. I guess the Phillies got a meeting for Juan Soto. Give me a break. But hey, he's got a QO attached to him. Someone like Willie Adames has a QO, right? Corbin Burns, Max Fried, if you're looking at some of the top pictures, right? They got compensation picks attached to them, right? An interesting one is Blake Snell, right? Blake Snell does not have the compensation pick attached to him, right? He was not eligible for the QO. So if you were to bring in Blake Snell, you would not have to give up that QO. But however, if I were to make a prediction here, I think that the Red Sox will end up signing, I think, a couple of these guys, right? Let's say they brought in Snell and they wouldn't have to give up, the Giants would not have to give up a compensation pick. The Red Sox would not have to give up a compensation pick to the Giants, right? But then I could see them going and, signing Teoscar Hernandez, right? I could see something like that. I don't think the Red Sox are still going to have it at the end of the day, but it's a good move from Craig, right? I see a lot of people out there saying, oh, great move from Craig. He read the market perfectly. Honestly, I think if you asked him, he would just say with Pivetta, he's a good pitcher, right? Guys want, teams want good pitchers. Teams want guys like him in the rotation. I feel like in a way it was almost kind of overblown, the whole qualifying offer thing. But I think in the end, right, he read the market. Yeah, of course he did. Honestly, I think it just made a lot of sense to extend the qualifying offer, and now they're going to be able to benefit from it. So we'll have to see. But I think this signals here that the Red Sox, they're in a good position. This is a really good start to the offseason. It's not a big splashy move, that we're looking for, but there's good implications behind it. And I think this is a great way to start. It sets you up for the offseason in a nice way. I'm excited for it. So moving on. And listen, everybody. I think this is where we were before I noticed that we didn't have any volume. So I think we're all caught up now. But the Red Sox, they made some roster moves today. And to everyone, thank you for sticking with me. Again, I apologize about the mute thing. My potato brain was at full force for, how long did we even go? What was that, 20 minutes? Of me just rambling and you guys couldn't hear a thing I was saying. I mean, goodness gracious. Anyway, we're back to where we were. So a couple of roster moves today. In case you are wondering what was happening today, it was the Rule 5 protection deadline day, right? So teams had to add guys to their 40-man roster for them to not be exposed in the Rule 5 draft. So I'm going to see if I have this right at the top of my head. I believe if a player is drafted at the age of 19, they have 4 seasons to be able to get added to a 40-man. And if they're not, well, then they are eligible for the Rule 5 draft. I think if you're 18 years old when you get signed, then I think you have 5 seasons at that point. I might have that wrong. I hope I do. I might be a little off. If I am, correct me in the comments. But either way, so for these two guys that the Red Sox added to the 40-man roster, Hunter Dobbins and Ghost Nixon Garcia. These are two guys that broke out in a big way this offseason, right? Taking a look at the rankings on Baseball America. By the way, I'm a Baseball America guy. I don't know if anyone else is out there. I like Pipeline, sure. I think the presentation on Pipeline is very nice, right? I think it's very user-friendly. I'm a big fan of Baseball America, though. I go back with Baseball America. I remember, when I'm, a little lad at 15 years old, and you always used to see the Baseball America magazines at the bookstore or whatever. And, always like them. Always. They do really good stuff. But anyway, Ghost Nixon Garcia at number 18, Hunter Dobbins at number 21. Let's talk about Hunter Dobbins here. Looking at the scouting report really quick. So Dobbins fills the strike zone with 4 pitches that project to be fringe average or better. He has above average command of a fastball that sits 93, 94, tops out at 96. I'll say this. with the Red Sox, they've been really revamping that pitching development over the last couple of years here, especially over the last year with Craig Breslow coming into the fold, right? Partnering up with guys like, Kyle Boddy, right? Really looking to get more out of the pitching in the organization. I wonder if maybe Hunter Dobbins is a guy you could even add a bit more velocity there. Also has a slider that showed potential to miss bats in the zone. A curveball and a splitter, which I guess is actually being called a splinker at this point, right? Shows both characteristics of a splitter and a sinker with good action that he's learning to control. Also has a sweeper to go along with it, a guy that throws a lot of strikes. Honestly, really sounds like a prototypical Craig Breslow kind of a guy that can miss bats in the zone, has some pretty good stuff, can throw strikes. Hunter Dobbins is a guy that had a very good year this past year, right? Started off in Double-A, 21 starts overall, just very solid numbers. ERA at a 3.17, FIP at a 2.92, got bumped up to Triple-A for 4 starts, continued on with the good numbers, ERA at a 2.61, FIP at a 3.67, but even bumped up the strikeouts over a very small sample size. But the one thing with Hunter Dobbins that I really noticed here, the home runs per 9. In 21 starts at Double-A this year, and remember with Double-A, you got good talent down in Double-A. He only gave up 1 home run over 21 starts. 105 innings pitched, only 1 home run. A guy that really puts the ball on the ground a lot. And hey, that works pretty well at Fenway Park, in my opinion. But then you look at Triple-A, he did give up a home run there, but he only gave up 2 home runs the entire year. That is diabolical. I mean, that is ridiculous, right? Had a 40% ground ball rate at Double-A, and it went up a lot. Small sample size, though, 55% there. This is a guy, hey, I really am excited about Hunter Dobbins. I was seeing a lot of highlights with him throughout the year. A guy that really progressed this year. Now, taking a look here, David Sandlin, they got him back in the John Schreiber trade with the Royals last offseason. Said some pretty funny thing here from Ethan Kums. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Says here, Hunter asked me to play catch after Tommy John recovery, and it was one of the worst experiences of my life. His fastball was doing some demon blank. No, I will not say the bad words on here. This is a family-friendly show. But he says here, he was throwing it at 90 miles per hour. Hitters will not have fun with him. And then David Sandlin retweeted it saying, the worst part is when he doesn't sign the splitter and you wear it off the shin. Sounds like it could be a pretty nasty pitch. I'm excited. Now with Ghost Nixon Garcia here, when it comes to him, this is a guy that broke out in a big way this past year, right? Taking a look at the numbers with him. This is a guy that, he's been trying to find his way over the last few years in the minor leagues, right? He started in rookie ball back in 2021 after getting signed. He went to CPX in 2022. He was there the entire year. Then he went to Single A after a couple of years, right? 2023. I believe he had some injuries that year and, not really a great season overall. Only had a 374 on the slugging, nothing impressive by any means. But this year he took a step, hitting 258 in A ball, right? With a 365 on base, a 517 on the slugging, a 155 WRC plus. Wasn't showing too much power at that point, right? 5 homers, 14 stolen bases. Well, granted, I'd say a pretty small sample size, 24 games. But then when it came to high A, when he got the bump, 53 games, had 16 homers, hit 311 with a 371 on base, a 627 slugging, a 176 WRC plus. Now, he did get the call for Double-A. He started to slow down a little bit at Double-A, but this is a guy where, again, you go back to 2023, looks like he was making some adjustments that year, and then he figured it out this year, starting in A ball. So I think my guess is he'll probably start at Double-A this coming year. I think that would probably be a good place to start for him and then, work his way up. But this is a guy where he is a power threat. He is a speed threat. Now, I did see some people out there saying, maybe a little surprising, right? Because he is still pretty far away. Because if he were to be taken in that Rule 5 draft, he would have to get added to a 26-man roster. But this is a guy where, the fact that they protected him like this, that made me think, there's some teams that have maybe been making some calls on him, right? That's my thinking on it. That's my perception, is maybe there's been some calls, some interest in him and a team, because this is a guy that is a power speed threat. It's interesting because he is still a bit far, right? But either way, there's a lot to be excited about with him. I'm excited to see what he can do this coming year. Now, when it comes to making room for these guys on the 40-man roster, they designated Brian Mata and Isaiah Campbell for assignment. I want to say this. Isaiah Campbell, I was pretty excited about. This is a guy that looked pretty good with the Mariners. They brought him in in the trade with the Mariners last offseason. I'm thinking, all right, cool. They're going to be beefing up the bullpen. This is a guy that looks like he could be a good 6th, 7th, maybe even an 8th inning kind of a guy. Had some pretty good stuff, but he was running into injuries this year. He wasn't really finding his way. And in the end, it is what it is. I think he will latch on to another team out there. Brian Mata is the more interesting one, right? This is a guy where, even go back to, 2019, 2020, Brian Mata has been a guy here where, this was the top pitching prospect in the organization. Granted, the Red Sox farm system was not looking very good over the last few years, but Brian Mata here, this is a guy where, people were waiting for him, right? He was a guy that got some notice out there, had some pretty good stuff, had some good velo, and he was putting up some pretty good numbers. He went to the Red Sox in 2016. That first year in rookie ball, he was putting up some pretty good stuff, but then he started just running into injuries over the last few years. He could not stay on the field, right? Go to 2023 here. In AAA, he's only able to throw 9 games overall. 2022, it was 19 games overall. And obviously he missed, 2021 before that as well. This is a guy that, people were excited about for a while. Had some good potential, I would say. A guy that had a pretty good build for the most part. Showed a lot of good things, but he just couldn't stay healthy. There was a chance that I was thinking this year maybe he could end up being added to the bullpen at some point. But, going into spring training, he was pretty much on his last chance, right? This is a guy who was out of options and ended up where he had a bit of a hamstring issue all year. He's dealing with some other things too. Brian Mata, man, this is one of those guys where, 10 years from now, who knows? Let's see if he ends up doing anything with another team. But I wonder if he ends up being a guy where you're like, man, that was a guy that he could have done some things, right? But he just couldn't stay healthy. We'll have to look back on this. I think there is still some potential with him. Let's see if he latches on with another team here. But in the end, that's pretty much it for the Red Sox roster moves. Actually, minus one little one here. I wouldn't say little. I think it was actually a pretty good bit of news here today. Cooper Criswell, eligible for a 4th option year. Now, I had to read this a couple of times because you're thinking, well, usually guys, they got 3 options, right? How did he get a 4th option here, right? So when it comes to a 4th option, it says here on MLB Trade Rumors, the league grants a 4th option year for players who exhaust their 3 original 3 option years in fewer than 5 professional seasons. So he used all 3 of his options before his 5 seasons, right? So meaning he gets one more on top of it. Cooper Criswell this year, this was a guy where he came up in big ways. I still remember people making fun of this move last offseason, right? It was him and Lucas Giolito being the only moves last offseason. But this guy really picked up the pitching staff at times this year. He had a couple of pretty good games, right? Overall, had a pretty decent season. More of a long man kind of a guy, spot starter kind of a guy. Overall a decent year. ERA at a 4.08, FIP at the 4.15. It was only $1 million. It ended up being a very good value, right? Because getting back to wins above replacement, on average, 1 win above replacement is worth around $8 million. So he put up $9 million worth of value, and he was only $1 million. Honestly, he was a pretty good bargain this year. So now you got him for next year too. I think this is good to keep someone like this on the staff, right? Yes, I mean, obviously, you want to go after guys out there, Garrett Crochet, right? Max Fried, maybe Corbin Burns, whoever it may be. So Cooper Criswell is not really a guy that you're going to be counting on to, be carrying you to the, to a World Series championship. But this is a guy that, he gives you some dependable innings, whether that's in a spot start or as a long reliever, even comes in a middle relief at some points, right? You want a guy like Cooper Criswell on your staff. He comes in, he gives you a bit of a different look. I like Cooper Criswell. He's one of those, like unsung hero kind of guys, in my opinion. So I'm glad, this ended up working out. Excited to have him back. Now, one more thing on the Nick Pivetta thing, since I'm looking at the rotation here. When it comes to Pivetta, again, like I was saying, I think he's going to get himself a pretty decent deal. But one thing I forgot to mention earlier, when it comes to the rotation, I would love to keep someone like Nick Pivetta. Of course, I would love, I've really enjoyed what he has been able to contribute to the Red Sox over the last few years. But I think it makes sense for the Red Sox to move on from Pivetta at this point. Yes, you would love to have him back, but the Red Sox right now, they need to address the top of the rotation. You got guys that can kind of step into that Pivetta role, right? Like that 3-4 in the rotation or 4-5, right? Somewhere in there. They got guys that can fill this out now. And if you're going to be adding a guy for the top of the rotation, right? Garrett Crochet, Fried, Burns, whatever it may be, that's going to push some guys down. So like Cutter Crawford, in my opinion, can be that Pivetta, right? He's a guy that, right, he's 4-5 in the rotation. So, in the end, I'll say it one more time. I'm happy for Pivetta. I think he's going to get himself a decent deal. But it's good that we also still have Cooper Criswell to rely on for next year. Now, before we wrap things up, of course we got to talk about Juan Soto. Why wouldn't we talk about Juan Soto? My goodness. Nothing really in the news here, but, I wanted to touch on the Ian Brown article, putting out here that the Red Sox are a sneaky contender to land Soto. He really just listed off some reasons, just a fun little article to read while you're, sitting there, laying in your bed, resting your head on your nice comfy pillow, and you're staring up into the ceiling thinking, all right, hey, Juan Soto, I need to keep dreaming about this guy being with Rafi in the lineup. It's a fun little article to read while you're dreaming, right? So he lists off some reasons here. Face of the franchise, right? And I agree with this. When you think of guys, like Rafael Devers, right? He is the highest paid player on the team. But Rafi's a guy where he comes off more as a guy that he just wants to play ball, right? He wants to just be a guy that's going to produce in your lineup. He's not really a guy that you can, you're going to be, when he's giving the post-game interviews, right? He's a guy that kind of comes off to me where he just wants to get it done, right? And he wants to go have his ice cream cone, you know what I mean? He's a guy that, again, just wants to play some ball. But when it comes to a face of the franchise, Juan Soto is a guy that he seems a bit more comfortable talking to the media. He seems a bit more, I'm not saying Rafi's uncomfortable talking to the media, but Soto is a guy that at least comes off to me as a guy that's okay with stepping in front of the camera. And, he can be that guy that you can really go to if you need, some comments on the team or whatever it may be. But yeah, Rafael Devers, of course, right? That's also a guy that you can turn to when being a leader of the team. But, Juan Soto is a guy, right? Superstar player, I agree with that. Looking here as well, Fenway Fit, that's another thing too. I've been seeing a lot of people out there, saying, oh, the Red Sox need right-handed bats. I'm not even kidding. Over on the main channel, I did a video today just going over some rumors. And I actually saw some people, some Dodgers fans, they were saying they would rather have Teoscar Hernandez over Juan Soto. I don't know. Am I missing something? Listen, I like Teoscar Hernandez. I would love Teoscar Hernandez to come to the Red Sox, but you can't tell me with a straight face. You can't do it. You can't tell me that you would rather have Teoscar Hernandez over Juan Soto. You can't. There's no defending it. I'm sorry. I don't. Hopefully, I'm not offending anyone out there. Listen, I like Teoscar, okay? But Juan Soto is Juan freaking Soto. Are you kidding me? But I understand where people, when they're mentioning the right-handed bat at Fenway Park, right? You got the monster there. You got to remember here with Soto. This is a guy, yes, he's a lefty bat, right? It doesn't matter. It does not matter, right? He can hit any pitching, anywhere he wants, power to all fields. Juan Soto, you think back to a guy, I'm not going to, I need to word this carefully because I don't want people to take me out of context. But the guy that I think about when I think of Juan Soto at Fenway Park, I think of Adrian Gonzalez, right? Remember when they brought in Adrian Gonzalez? People were saying this guy's swing is built for Fenway Park because he had such a good opposite field approach that, he could still hit dead center. He could pull, but he was a guy that was very comfortable hitting oppo and he could hit him off the monster. Juan Soto is like that, like times 10. He is absolutely he's a perfect fit anywhere he goes, but he will absolutely be a perfect fit at Fenway Park because this is a guy that can just pepper off some, make a little bit of weak contact and he'll still flip it off the monster. Juan Soto, absolutely perfect for Fenway Park there. Following in Big Poppy's footsteps. Listen, I know people say, yeah, he could be the next David Ortiz. I'm one of those where, it's fun to make the comparisons. Listen, in my opinion, listen, yes, Big Poppy, legend, obviously, no argument, right? But I look at Juan Soto as being the next Juan Soto, right? When it comes to, building legacies with the Red Sox, Juan Soto, I think, would be in a league of his own, right? Big Poppy, obviously, Hall of Famer, one of the best hitters of all time. Absolute pleasure, a privilege to be able to watch someone like David Ortiz over the years, helping us win 3 World Series championships. But I think Juan Soto has the potential to be, again, I want to word this carefully because I don't want people taking me out of context. I think Juan Soto can go down as one of the greatest players of all time. I think, and just like David Ortiz, but I think Juan Soto could end up having a better career than Big Poppy. We'll have to see about the postseason kind of stuff. I don't know if you can take that away from Big Poppy. I don't know if he's going to be beat ever there, but Juan Soto, I think, I don't think he would be in Big Poppy's footsteps. I think he would be in his own footsteps. Juan Soto is Juan Soto. I hope I didn't cheese anyone off with those comments. I feel like someone's going to get ticked off saying, oh, you're disrespecting David Ortiz. No, I'm not. I'm just saying Juan Soto is Juan Soto. And he brings up winning here. Hey, the winning, I think, honestly, out of all these reasons that Ian Brown mentioned here, I think the winning might be the hardest part to sell because they haven't been doing a lot of winning in the last few years. You go back to 2018, right? 2019 World Series hangover, 2020, whatever. 2020 was 2020. 2021, obviously, they put together a good year. They had one. I like to say 2021 was like one last breath of that 2018 team. And, they just got enough out of it to make a run in the postseason. And then, go back now the last 3 years, they haven't been able to get it done. So I think the winning part is going to be a tough sell. You can sell them on the future, right? How you're a lot better off than you were, after winning that World Series in 2018. You had Mookie, you traded him away. Yeah, absolutely. There's an argument. You can look back, say, yeah, we probably should have signed Mookie Betts, right? It is what it is. So that's going to be, I think, the hard sell. But I think the Red Sox over the years have shown that they can get themselves back on track. I think that if they're going to have any shot at Soto, I think they're going to have to say, listen, we will bring in other players along with you. I think that's something he's going to be thinking about. Yes, they've got some good players that are coming up the pipe. But when it comes to having success immediately at the major league level, I think he would also want the Red Sox to add to the pitching staff, right? Bring in even another bat like a Teoscar Hernandez, or maybe make a trade out there. I don't know. I keep seeing people dreaming about Vlad Jr. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think that's like a 0.1% chance of happening. I don't see why the Blue Jays would trade Vlad Jr. at this point, especially in division. I don't know, but you know what I mean? I think he would want the Red Sox to add more after him. So we'll see. A bit of a fun article here from Ian Brown today. All right, or actually, was this yesterday? Anyway, thought I would touch on it. No big news when it comes to the Red Sox and Soto at this point. We do know that the Dodgers were meeting with Soto today. The Phillies, I guess, got an interview with him. We'll just have to wait and see how this all goes. But everyone, I do want to apologize one more time. I am so sorry that I had the mute button on for 20 minutes or so. That is, I think, the first time I've done that. I'm still getting used to The new software that I'm using, I did switch to a Mac recently. I had the PC for a while. I'm using a new program on the Mac, and with my old program that I was using, that would have never happened, right? Because I was so used to it. This one, I got to make sure I'm crossing my T's and dotting my I's a little bit more. So again, apologies on that. And if you did stick with me during that potato brain moment, I do appreciate you. But everyone, I'm out of here. Go have yourself a good rest of your night. Again, if there is news tomorrow, we'll be back right here at the desk, I guess we'll call it. We're back at the desk, right? So go have yourself a good night, everyone, and we'll talk to you next time.